We will get rolling. So welcome to Williamsfield Schools. I'm Tim Forker, Superintendent. We've got a short program for you here this morning, and then we want to give you an opportunity to walk around, check out the charging stations, go for a little bus ride. We've got a few licensed drivers to take some folks around, if they would like. We are one of the few districts in the country running electric buses on daily routes. We have not only electrified, we've electrified in a way that supports the expansion of renewable energy production. And our whole goal, which we are now realizing, is we've turned our big yellow school buses from energy consumers to energy assets. This whole thing started with our STEM team. For those of you on the STEM team, raise your hands, please. Yay! Before you get too excited about our STEM team, it started 8 years ago, so these guys weren't involved. However, our STEM team leader, Mrs. Sechrist, was involved 8 years ago. Her and Mrs. White led a team that built a community microgrid. They built a model of a community microgrid that kind of started this whole concept and spurred the whole idea. It was sparked by I'll call it random, but it was an email from Susan Mudd at the Environmental Law and Policy Center. It was random for me, but it was obviously strategic for her. About some Volkswagen settlement funds that were available for school bus electrification. And that started to advance our thinking, right, of how we could build this energy resiliency on campus in a way that also includes clean energy consumption on site. It was fueled by funding from Tony and the EPA Clean School Bus Program. So wherever Tony's at, there he is, Tony Maeda. But we would be remiss without mentioning the EPA School Bus Program, because that's a vast majority of the funding we got for this project came from those rebates that were announced last October. We are excited. We've had a lot of partners that have led from that announcement in October to full fleet electrification, within 13 months. So we're super excited and super proud. And there is another round of rebates open. So for school districts looking to do this, make sure you apply, because there's money for priority districts and non-priority districts alike. It was supported with planning support from our friends at the World Resources Institute. So I've got to give a shout out to our friends at the World Resources Institute that really helped us advance our thinking in how to structure this in the most efficient way possible. And it was made real by our friends at Oberlander Electric. Jeremy Plaker, you'll get a chance to hear from a little bit from now. Members of IBEW Local 34, Ameren, Illinois, Nuvve, and Borg Warner, as you can see on the charging stations. Siemens, which is the manufacturer of the switchgear that I'm standing in front of. And of course, Lion Electric with the new manufacturing facility in Joliet, Illinois, is the manufacturer of the buses that we utilize. The whole thing was put into action by, we've got to give a round of applause to Adam Dubit, our transportation director. That's what Adam walks into every morning when he walks into his office. The drivers are all just clapping for him. But also Russell Groper, our facilities director, who's led a lot of the work on the installs. Does a lot of work, wears a variety of hats around here for us. Jeremy King, one of our drivers, does the same, a lot of buildings and grounds work. He and Adam are actually both trained technicians now on these Lion Cs. So we're very lucky to have those guys on site. Our drivers, other drivers, Dick Staker, Vicky Quick, Mark Chanley, Shelley and Pierre Ponce, and Todd Jones. Did I miss any of our drivers? Yeah, Carrie DePaul. Absolutely. And what these drivers did was phenomenal. They jumped into an electric bus during the middle of a school year when all the buttons are in different spots, and we could not thank them more. All in all, we've run these routes in November. We've cut fuel costs by 93%, saving about $700 per bus in the month of November, which is a short month. We're poised to save about $6,000 per bus per year in fuel. And this is only the beginning. We're poised to use, you can see on our big DC fast chargers, the acronym or indication of V2G. So those are vehicle to grid. There's vehicle grid to grid technology behind them, which means we will be able to offload energy from these bus batteries to use on campus, and eventually our friends at Ameren will help our friends at Ameren with grid stability, and eventually get paid to do so. Ameren's been very good to work with, and we'll keep working with them on that. The last thing that I'll mention, in addition to the plans that we have for these buses, is we're working with Knox County emergency personnel to utilize our buses for emergency power support in the event of outages, natural disasters in local communities. So think of the Yates City Community Center, where we might be able to pull a school bus up to use as a warming or cooling center, should something happen in that community, and we could help folks out. Mid-Century Fiber, got to give a big shout out. We keep track of how our buses are charging based upon the online platform that we would not have access to if it was not for our local telephone co-op, which is Mid-Century Fiber. Shout out to Dan Self and the crowd there for helping us make that happen. And our last but not least, definitely not least, our local Board of Education for trusting us on this whole project and making it real. We have one of our board members, Miss Gina Strum, is out in the audience for us today. So, with all of that in mind, it is my pleasure to introduce Susan Mudd from the Environmental Law and Policy Center.
It is such a pleasure to be here today with all of you. At the Environmental Law and Policy Center, we became aware a number of years ago of the dangers of diesel pollution. We learned about it actually not originally about school buses, but about construction equipment and the variety of equipment that people are exposed to in their working lives or related to diesel pollution. When the Volkswagen settlement came along a few years ago, as Superintendent Farker correctly mentioned, we became aware that there was an opportunity to start moving away from diesel towards cleaner electric vehicles and equipment. And we wanted to use that opportunity to help protect children, because electric school buses are one of the allowable uses of those funds. And what we learned along the way was that in Illinois, there are 1 million children a day who ride school buses to and from school. And diesel pollution is particularly damaging to children. Why? Because their lungs are not fully developed, and they breathe more per pound of body weight than we adults do. So it's particularly important to move kids out of diesel. And we realized that in Illinois, as in every other state in the U.S., most of the buses are still diesel, but there are now these new opportunities. So we've been incredibly happy and lucky to work with Superintendent Farker and others to try to move away from diesel transportation for our kids. Another reason that it's so important for kids is that in terms of kids being more vulnerable to diesel pollution, although the rides to and from school are less than 10% of a child's day, the ride in a diesel school bus is often responsible for 1/3 of the pollution that they will be exposed to over the course of a day. Another reason to try to move away from diesel and towards zero-emission electric vehicles. So in the years since I have gotten to meet Superintendent Farker, I've seen dedication to a number of things. One is healthier rides for the kids, but at the same time doing it in a way that's healthy for the whole community by tying into solar power and moving away from a reliance on coal power. In working to make sure that taking full advantage of federal funds, such as the Clean School Bus Program, which thank you for Congressman for helping to make that program a reality, and to EPA for implementing it, to making sure to think about the microgrid and the possibilities of the independence from polluting sources. So it's really been a pleasure to see this project come together and to celebrate the fact of all the effort that's come from the electric company, from the contractors, from all the school officials and staff who've made this happen. So I want to really thank you, Superintendent Farker, and all who are making this happen. This is a shining example, frankly, for Illinois, but for many other places. You all may not sit on the number of webinars that I sit on these days about this issue, but I can tell you Superintendent Farker is now known across the country for this work, and the work that he and all have done to make this possible in Williamsfield is helping school districts even beyond Williamsfield. So I'm really pleased that 100 Williamsfield students are now getting to ride these buses, and the ripple effect is larger. So thank you, and thanks all for making this possible.
It takes a village, that's for sure. It's now my pleasure to introduce Tony Maeda from EPA Region 5.
Thank you, everyone. It is an honor to be here. My colleague Alexis and I are happy to be here. And I do kind of want to continue on with like Susan's comments, is that it is not, two things. Tim is a shining light in the state of Illinois for schools, for electrification, for deployment of electric vehicles. He's not only one of the first schools to be, almost like fully electric now. He was ahead of the curve. He's an advocate for these vehicles. And like Susan said, you're now nationally known. Our headquarters goes and looks and asks him to, hey, could you say what you just said to this group to other folks and explain to them, how it realistically happens? There are real benefits. There are real challenges as well. And the other thing, too, is that it does take a group effort and a lot of different partnerships to make this happen. You're not just buying a new vehicle. You're buying a whole new power system, and it's a whole new way of operating it in certain, in certain measures of operating the vehicle and what you have to look at when you're running it, and taking care of it, making sure the batteries are all right, and it's not as simple as you think. And you've made that happen, and you're helping make that happen for other schools, not just in the state of Illinois, but across the country. So I do want to thank you, Tim, for being really just a champion for the vehicles. They are a lot cleaner. Like Susan said, there's direct exposure to diesel emissions from the children on the bus, the folks who are operating the bus, the folks who are maintaining the buses. The closer you are to that tailpipe, the closer you are to diesel particulate matter emissions. And they go deep into your lungs, they can go into your bloodstream, and it could be nasty stuff because it's not just one type of material, it could be anything. It just has 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller. So it's just a mess of different stuff that comes out of the back of the bus that you be breathing in. And you're not, because these are electric buses now. So the last thing I'd like to say is that there is funding still available from EPA and from other sources. Tim, you've been very scrappy, and if you don't apply for it, you're not going to get the funding. And so I think it's a clear example, too, that you have looked at all the options that are out there, and you don't, you apply for stuff, you're not going to get everything, but, you've made a lot happen to help, to help augment a lot of the costs of deploying these new vehicles and equipment. So I encourage folks to visit the epa.gov/clean school bus website. Take a picture of the QR code with your phone, it'll take you there. There is a rebate program open right now until the end of January. It is currently for at least $500 million in rebates for electric and alt-fuel buses. If you're a priority school, you can get up to $345,000 for a Class 7, Class 8 electric school bus. And that includes the cost of the bus and fueling, and you can kind of divvy that up. And if you're a non-priority school, you can get up to $200,000 for the cost of the electric bus for Class 7 and Class 8. And unlike last year, at least 40% of the funds, well, 40% of the funds will go towards non-priority schools. So this time everybody does have a chance, whereas last year kind of the money ran out before we got to the non-priority schools. So EPA, we're trying to tweak the program to make it equitable year by year. And again, like, we're always going to utilize the partnerships that we have. Tim is also now one of the leaders in our Illinois Clean School Bus Coalition that Alexis and others are heading up. And so, you know, sharing the knowledge and sharing the way to do it, it's very beneficial to our state. It's very beneficial to our country. So thank you. And again, thank you for having EPA here.
One of the things I'm most excited about this morning was for Tony and Alexis to get to experience coming to Williamsfield from Chicago for an 8:30 meeting. So Alexis, when you're planning those 9 o'clocks in Chicago, you know what I'm dealing with. It's now my pleasure to introduce from Ameren, Illinois, Mark Minden. We'll clap for Mark anyway. I'll speak on behalf of Mark a little bit just to offer my thanks to Ameren, Illinois for all of their help with this project. Because when we first started talking about full electrification at our bus barn, it was Ameren folks that helped us do the calculations to see how much capacity we had out here. And at the very beginning, my vision was a DC fast charger at the end of every bay. And Ameren's like, you know, this is how much upgrading we would have to do for you to do that. And then that allowed us to properly scale our operation for what the utility could support. So we really appreciate the partnership with Ameren, Illinois. So from here, we'll just fast forward then to Jeremy Plaker from Oberlander Electric.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning. My name is Jeremy Plaker. I'm with Oberlander Electric, and I was the project manager for the electrical installation of the vehicle chargers. When I was first asked if Oberlander Electric would be interested in possibly installing vehicle chargers, I had assumed that this would be the typical car charger installation. I was wrong. After sitting down with Superintendent Farker's team and hearing of his plan to convert the district's entire diesel-operated bus fleet to electric, I quickly realized that this was much larger than just a couple Tesla chargers. This was the school district's vision to not only reduce operating expenses, but reduce the carbon footprint and show their dedication towards ensuring a healthier future for our children. Quite fitting for a school district that's dedicated to educating our children. I'm very proud to have been part of this project, and I'd like to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of our team of highly skilled union electricians and their expertise. Their dedication to detail and commitment to the safety was the driving force behind the successful implementation of this project. Their efforts have ensured that these charging stations are not only efficient, but reliable and secure. Thank you to Superintendent Farker, the school board, and all the Williamsfield community for trusting Oberlander Electric, IBEW Local 34 with this project. Together, let's strive for a more sustainable world.
Yeah, and very much appreciate the partnership and support of IBEW Local 34. Thank you guys very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce the individual that was in charge of the weather for today, Congressman Eric Sorensen.
It's good to be with you. Also, in a weird December day where we're seeing the temperature outside of this room warmer than it is inside. Look, for the naysayers that say that this isn't worth it, they don't understand that when you look at a normal school bus, okay, where is that tailpipe? The tailpipe is right where the kids are standing. When kids are waiting outside on a cold December day to get on the bus, they're waiting there in the emissions of diesel. This solves that problem, and it solves that problem in its entirety. I'm so thankful to be back at Williamsfield too, where Williamsfield allowed me to have a tour to see this microgrid that they had built, the students had built with their own hands years ago. And then that set the stage for where we are here today. Because I don't know if anybody realizes it, but we're living in the future today. This is the future. And any time that we can spotlight Illinois as being the example or place in Illinois, Williamsfield, Illinois is the model for what's going to happen across the entire country, that's huge. So I'm honored to stand here with school leaders, environmental leaders to launch this effort. Right here, clearly, we're leading the way in creating safer, healthier schools for our kids. Williamsfield is supporting the entire community, not just its students, with cleaner air and tools to provide power during emergencies. I applaud Williamsfield schools for leading the charge to make our communities safer and healthier for all of our children. We need to act as a model. We need other school districts to do what's happening right here in Williamsfield, and this project is going to be successful only with the organization of all of the partnerships, the public and the private partnerships, which I continue to foster and make sure that we're funding in Congress. I will work in Congress to make sure that everyone here, and our students especially, have a seat at the table to get the resources that we need here at home. And I will also be an advocate to make sure that these investments will help Illinois families and schools so we can build stronger communities right here in our region. So thank you all for having me.
All right, at this time, we have a little-known tradition in Williamsfield where when we have parades, 90% of us are in the parade. So with that in mind, we're going to have a ribbon cutting. So anyone that was involved in this project, Tony from EPA, Lexus, Susan, Haj, IBEW as representatives, Jeremy, Dan from Mid-Century, we'd like everyone to come up. And Representative Sorensen, if you would do the cutting honors, I'd appreciate it. I will hold this in. Don't turn it over. Don't turn it over. There's a joke there. He said he's one of our guards. Can I sneak in? Yeah, of course. You need to be in the middle. Here's Gina. Gina, okay, get out here. Miss Seacrest, Christian, take her phone if she needs a picture taken. Do we need to scoot up to it, guys?